Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to the 2nd of June. This is your Daily Dose. I'm your host, Edward Benish from the Pinellas Park Church of Christ. Certainly good to be with you today. Hopefully, this will be your daily dose of encouragement. And we are going to be in the book of 2nd John. So if you want to go ahead and turn there, we're going to be right about verse 7 and talk a little bit about some things that, well, maybe a little bit heavier things, but that's okay. Hopefully, you'll walk away encouraged and strengthened by it. But remember to put all of your updates and your prayer requests in the chat, whether you're on Zoom or if you are on the YouTube. Go ahead and put those things there, and we'll make sure that they get added to our prayer list. And as always, we encourage your feedback about the program. Leave your notes, leave your words of encouragement. It's always good to hear good things, but it's always good to hear things that maybe need corrected too. So if you're having trouble with the feed, if you can't hear, or if it's not loud enough, or there are other annoying habits by your host, or whatever it might be, just leave that in the chat. Rest assured, we do take constructive criticism as well. So make sure you are leaving those things there. But I want to go back to the book of 2nd John for just a few moments. And John is a short book, so we're not going to, simply pass the opportunity here to start at the beginning again, read down to the verses that we are going to observe. I mean, the whole book is 13 verses. So let's start at the beginning. That way we'll have read it at least, 3 or 4 times by the time that we are done. And hopefully you can gain from that as well. The writer is John, the same book, same person who wrote the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and the book of Revelation. He is the apostle whom Jesus loved. And he was the one that lived longer than just about any other apostle. So he writes a lot. He writes a lot about truth. He writes a lot about love, and he writes a lot about knowing those things. So let's begin. 2nd John, chapter 1, verse 1. The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but also all who know truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us from the God, the Father, from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, in truth and love. I rejoice greatly to find some of your children walking in truth, and that was kind of our point yesterday. How do we walk? It's not enough to know truth. It's not enough to have the grace and mercy and peace. But it's not enough to know about love, but we got to walk in those things. We got to live a life that is worthy of them. I rejoice greatly to find some of your children walking in truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I were writing you a new commandment, but the one we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to the commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in it. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and antichrist. Watch yourselves, so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Anyone who does not go on, anyone who does not go on ahead and does not abide everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. So we're in this section where John is dealing once again with the idea of false teachers. He says that they are deceivers. He says that they have gone out in the world. He says that they are abundant in his day and age. How do we know whether a teacher is false? Well, you can go back and you can look at the opening verses of 2nd John, and he gives us kind of the criteria, right? If we do anything that's unloving, or if we're acting in unloving ways, then we're acting in un-Christ-like ways, and that's false, and perhaps maybe even personally or purposely deceptive. If we're not walking according to the truth as delivered by Christ, then we are deceiving, or at least in the very least, we are deceived, and we are not teaching, truth. If we don't act as if we have that grace and that mercy and that peace that he talks about in those opening verses, then again, we have been deceived, or perhaps are deceiving and not, knowing the truth of God's word. But I want us to talk a little bit about this whole idea that occurs here at the end of verse 7. Let's read that verse one more time and focus on it for just a few moments. For many deceivers have gone into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the antichrist. Now, a lot of people make a lot of hay of this whole antichrist idea. And in certain types of teaching, what they'll tell you is that, well, the antichrist is the antichrist, right? Not one having the quality or attributes of being against Christ, which is really what John means. But instead, they will point to a specific person or a specific idea. I mean, you just search the internet. Who is the Antichrist? See what you come up with. I can tell you a few that I have seen that I just thought were actually incredible. You've got Bill Gates and Steve Wozniak, of course, the Apple and Microsoft. They are the Antichrist because of all the computer technology and so on and so forth. And there's a big long explanation for why that is. World leaders across our nation who are perhaps despotic or maniacal leaders. Well, they are the Antichrist. Or every cult leader that has ever existed, from David Koresh on down the line to Jim Jones. For some reason, they are on that list of being the Antichrist, that person that we are supposedly waiting for, who's going to usher in this new age, of persecution and tribulation, and likewise it's going to be the beginning of the thing that sometimes they call the rapture, and then several different other things. But anyhow, the idea is patently a false idea. Come on in. Patently false idea. Sorry, I actually have someone coming here. Hey, come on in, man. Coming here to fix my dishwasher. She's fine. Give me a second, guys. Hold up, let me get her in. My son. It's a church thing. All right, guys. Sorry about that. A little interruption, but the nice fella from Geek Squad is actually here to fix my stuff. So anyhow, we will pick up. Anyhow, there's this false idea about what these things are. John is really the only one that ever mentions it. As a matter of fact, if you go into First John and you begin to look at this idea, he's the only one that mentions it. But we don't need to go. He starts back in First John and works all the way to Second John. But if you look very simply at the word itself, it just means, against the teachings of Christ. And it occurs in 1 John 2, 18, 1 John 2, 22, 1 John 4, 3, 2 John 1, 7, and 1 John 2, 18. And you'll notice in this particular passage, it says that for many are the deceivers. And then he transitions into the singular. So he goes from the plural to the singular. So he says that there are many people who can be defined, by this. And the basic definition for it is that they deny that Jesus Christ was ever come, that he was never, part of being in the flesh. Well, we know that that's a common thing, even nowadays. That's something that, people, have asserted and continue to assert. But when he gets down and he transitions to, the singular, he's referring to, the individual. People can take the idea of being like those deceivers and like those people who are in the world at his time and make those same claims. So it's not specifically one person, but it is instead a specific attribute that they possess and that they proclaim. But it's certainly not something that we would ever, advocate. But on the other hand, we can't blow this idea up into something that it's not. All of a sudden, you've got people jumping over to Paul's writings in Thessalonians, calling, this guy the son of perdition, which adds, somehow weight to the singular person idea. And then they carried it over even into the book of Revelation and talk about, numbers of beasts and things like that, and it's just very simply not, connected to that notion of end times. But the simple fact of the matter is you don't want to stand in those end times, being the kind of person who is this deceiver and who denies that Jesus Christ ever came in the flesh. So for us, it can be a real it can be a real word of encouragement in the sense that we have that knowledge. We have all of the things that we need to know and understand, and we can stand upon them with relative certainty. He says, "Look to yourselves that you do not lose the things that you have wrought." So it is possible to move away from it, but that we receive a full reward. You can't be a deceiver. You can't be one who works against Christ and still expect to receive a reward. So hopefully, that is one of those things that we are adopting in our lives, so that we can constantly be watchful, constantly live in such a way that we are making the proclamation that indeed he did come, indeed he did die for us, and indeed we have that salvation that he offers because of that sacrifice. Now I want you to notice verse 9. He says, "Whoever transgresses and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God, and he abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he hath both the Son and the Father." So if you want them to abide in you, then you've got to continue doing those things that are part of his word. To not do that means that we are against Christ. So you don't have to be some specifically assigned person. My favorite one, of course, was Harry Potter, a fictional character, or a fictitious character. We don't have to be, or we shouldn't be looking for that one specific person. We instead should be looking inwardly at what our belief is, at who we are, and how we are acting. We shouldn't be acting like deceivers. We shouldn't be we shouldn't be deceived, but instead we should be constantly concerned about whether or not we are standing firmly upon that doctrine. So today, in our daily dose, we're asking that question. Are you standing firmly upon God's word, or are you, in your word, your deed, your attitudes, your actions, standing against him? I appreciate everybody coming out today. Sorry again for the interruption. That's my fault, just bad timing on my part. But you guys have a wonderful day. This has been your Daily Dose.